Everybody. Welcome to my webinar presentation. My name's Evan, and I'm going to be presenting this afternoon on holidays in the field, what they look like, and kind of a typical what they feel like, what students' processes are like, and mostly I'll be talking about Christmas and Thanksgiving because those are the two kind of main holidays that we really do something special for and kind of change the usual routine of the day. But I'll also cover other holidays like birthdays and any other holidays that kids request to celebrate, and so I'll go over that as well. But first, before I get into it, I will introduce myself. My name's Evan Meyer. Like I said, I have been working for Open Sky for 5 years. I started as a guide, just as a field guide, and did that for about 2.5 years. I was also worked my way up to being a senior field guide, so it's kind of the senior field guide is more of the one that's like in charge of the group, and ultimately all the responsibility comes down on. And so I did that for about a year, and then I also was the master senior field guide. And the focus of a master senior field guide is to help mentor and train and shape other field guides up into being seniors and things like that. So I did that, and then for the last 2 years I've been the field manager. And the field manager is kind of in control, or they're not in control, they are the manager of the whole field. They oversee everything. They always know where the groups are at all times, what the issues are in all the groups at all times. They're kind of the main link of communication between the outside world and the groups. And that has the same schedule as a field guide, 8 days on, 6 days off. But I'll get a little bit more into that later when I talk about guides' roles. So what it all comes down to is that I've spent 2 Christmases and 2 Thanksgivings in the fields, and a lot of birthdays and a lot of the holidays in between. So that's who I am. And currently, now that I'm no longer field manager, I'm a family services counselor. So I do family quests and wellness weekends and things like that. So I hope to maybe see one or some of you in the future out in the field. So I will get started here. So first I'll just go over the basic agenda of what the rest of my presentation is going to be. I'll start by talking about what it looks like, both what Christmas and Thanksgiving look like as far as just the structure of the day, what we do when we wake up in the morning, and kind of just through the day, the logistics, what does it typically look like structure-wise. And then I'll go into what it feels like, and kind of the caveat for those two are that there's a lot of guides have a lot of play or a lot of control and a lot of say in what the day looks like, and every group is very different. So what it feels like and what it looks like can be pretty different from year to year, from holiday to holiday, from group to group. But I'm going to just kind of go through what I've seen, what's typical, and what's usual to see out there, both structurally and what it feels like. So when I talk about what it feels like, I'll talk about just the typical process of some of the sadness that we go through as a group and as individuals go through, and how we process that and turn it into a positive. So I'll get into that, and then I'll go into guides' roles, how the guides really set the tone for holidays and really help nurture the group into being a positive role. And then I'll talk about the students' role and how the students get involved, because they have a lot of say too. The holidays are as much about it's all about the students actually, and so we give them a lot of say. We kind of ask them earlier before the holiday, like, so what do you want it to look like? What sort of traditions do you want to celebrate? What did you do with your family that you would want to see us do on Christmas or Thanksgiving? So students have a lot of say about the day as well, and I'll talk about that. And then I'll talk about food. Food is, of course, a big part of any holiday. It's kind of, I think it's a human thing. We connect over food, and so that's also a big part of both Christmas and Thanksgiving. They get special food for the day, and I'll talk about that. And then typically we do a community gathering. All the groups will gather in one place at base camp, and so we have a greater feeling of community. And we do a fire busting competition, so I'll talk about that and what that looks like, and that's a lot of fun. That usually really builds up energy and lots of laughter, and then we also do, after the fire busting, we usually do a talent show. So the groups will come up with something to, like an act or a song, or individual students will go up and read a poem or sing a song or something like that. So I'll talk about that as well. And then typically at the end of the day, there's reflecting on the holiday, where kind of after the big energy, which is the community gathering. It's like usually like really high energy, lots of laughter. There's kind of a low. We have time for them to be off on their own and kind of reflect on the holiday. And so I'll talk about that and what that looks like. And then I'll briefly go over other celebrations in the holiday, things that other ways that we acknowledge culture and history and other holidays, birthdays, even solstices and equinoxes. We usually will do something around. So I'll talk about that as well. So what does a holiday look like? It starts most any day. Get the students up around 7:30 to 8 in the morning, and we'll start the day like we usually do, which is most of the time with yoga and meditation. And usually in the morning there's some sort of acknowledgement, like, yeah, Merry Christmas, and everybody. But it's nothing official, and it's just kind of light. And then we'll do yoga and meditation, and then we'll get into breakfast. And I'll go into more of this on the feelings, but that's usually breakfast. Morning is kind of when most of the sadness happens. That's when there's a lot of grieving, that they're not with their family. And so usually around breakfast, we'll do a feelings check where everybody just goes around and expresses what's going on for them. And so that typically happens every holiday. And then we'll do, so there's a lot of validation in that too. It's kind of the start of building the community, everybody's kind of validating each other, like, yeah, like I hear you feel sad, I feel sad too, and I hear this is what you used to do. And so and guides will be a big part of that as well. And then usually we'll do a game or an initiative of some sort, just to make it light and fun, kind of try to create that positive energy, to create the family feeling within the group. So a game can look anywhere from like hacky sack to other just kind of outdoor games that we do, like Mafia and bocce ball, and there's like frisbees, and so it's kind of whatever the group wants to do. Usually any group will have culturally their favorite game, and so usually that's what we'll do in the mornings. And then we really start cooking for the feast, and that can look it can look different from group to group. Students and guides work together and figure out, do the guides want to cook? Do the students want to cook? Who wants to cook? There's a lot of discussion around that. And it's really fun. I'll go more into the food and how we cook the food, but that's actually a really fun part of the day as well. And usually during that, the kids will have a heads up that there's a talent show later in the day. So they'll start to plan and come up with ideas and scheme about what act they want to do, either as a group or individually. So that's kind of going on the whole day as well. And then once the food is cooked, usually we'll do some sort of a prayer or gratitude circle or something to acknowledge the food. And that looks different from group to group, from year to year, holiday to holiday. But really the most important thing about it is that the guides really sit down with the students as a community, and then they'll talk about, so what did your family do? How did you, either were you doing a prayer to open up the meal, or how do you guys want this to look like when we open up the meal? And so the guides and the students will come up with something, and usually what it looks like is a gratitude circle, and then sometimes one or two students will feel called to say a traditional prayer that they were used to saying as a family before either the Thanksgiving or Christmas holiday. So that goes on as well. And the eating is usually fun. It's just kind of light conversation during the actual eating. And sometimes it gets to more of a structured conversation about sharing, sharing traditions. What does your family usually do? Like, what games do you usually play? And kids have all kinds of great stories about, my family plays hearts after the traditional holiday meal or something. So that's kind of fun. That's another way of just sharing and building a sense of family. And then they head off to the big open sky gathering. And the first thing they do is a bust off, and so a bust off means making a fire, making primitive fire. So we use busting as like it's kind of part of the lingo here. Busting a fire means making a fire by friction in the old traditional sense, which there's a picture of behind me, behind my, I guess it would be my left shoulder. There, the kid with the bow and the Crocs. So that's kind of, I think there's another slide I have on what it looks like, and I think I'll go into that more of that later. And but that's really fun. It's a competition, and it's also all the groups are together, so the students can like look at other groups and other guides and kind of realize like, oh, we're really not alone in this. There's this greater community, and the friendly competition ads is kind of fun. There's always the adolescent girls versus the adolescent boys. The adolescent boys are super scared of getting beat by the adolescent girls, which they often do, which is really fun. And so it's usually pretty friendly and light with the fire competition. But I'll go into that more detail in that later. And then there's a talent show, and that's different year to year, holiday to holiday. But typically, each group will come up with some sort of an act, and most of it's kind of making light and making fun of being at Open Sky during Christmas or during a holiday. So they'll take a lot of students will take a song like a rock and roll song and change the lyrics to making fun of pooping in bags and having to call their name when they go and bust, and just things like that. So, and that's pretty fun. Lots of laughter with that. And then it's also can be really real. A student might volunteer to go and sing a song by himself or herself up in front of the group, in front of all of Open Sky. And so it can go from lots of laughter and fun to like somebody being really vulnerable and open with like, I'm gonna like sing this song that I wrote in front of all of you guys. So it's usually got a really special feel. It's usually the highlight of the holiday experience for me. And then after the talent show, depending on how early in the day it is, sometimes a guide or the field managers are kind of the MC of the whole community gathering. And so either a guide or the field manager will, if we have time, we'll also do something. A lot of guides are really into storytelling, so they'll know, there's been guides that have known a traditional like Celtic myth, and they're really good animated storytellers, and so they'll tell this story that they have memorized in front of all the students. So that can be really fun too. And then, so that's kind of the emotional and physical highlight of the day. And then usually we try to get back to the individual sites in time for some personal time. Let the students go off on their own and journal or write letters or read letters, or just have personal reflection time on what the day was for them, and what, just how the experience was not being around their families. And then it usually lasts about an hour and a half. And then before we go to bed, we'll usually kind of gather around the fire and have a snack, because we usually eat the meal earlier in the day, around 2:30 or 3. So have a little snack, and there'll be, sometimes it's been just some like fun light banter, and sometimes there's some processing of the reflection, and kids are sharing like what their hour alone was like, or what the holiday was like. And but again, it's different year to year, day to day. So that's kind of the basic structure of both Thanksgiving and Christmas in the field. And then, so what do holidays feel like in the field? What do holidays feel like? They, like I said, when students wake up, is usually the low. It's the time when students feel the most, are really mourning the most about not being with their families, because we haven't really built that community yet, and it's just kind of like sad waking up realizing like I'm here in the field and it's Christmas, and so there is some sadness, and that really gets we really enable students to let that out. That's a really important part of creating the rest of the day, really creating that sense of family and community, by just allowing all the students to really speak to how they're feeling, and allowing students to vent and say like, yeah, I feel really sad right now, and I feel abandoned, and I feel this, it all gets reflected by the students and validated by guides, and that's really the foundation for really starting this process of creating a more of a family feeling, because all the students are feeling that, and the guides are too. The guides are in the field with students instead of with their families, so the guides even have sadness, and they'll express that too. So the basis is for the feeling of a holiday is like all of us feel a little bit sad about being here, and so we're all in this together. We're here. We are. We can't change that. And so we're going to make the most of it, and that's kind of what, like, that's where the shift happens, when it goes from everybody feeling pretty sad to students will start to speak up and be like, well, so this is where we're all at, and I guess let's make the best of this, and like really let's make the most of this. And that usually resonates with students, and students are like, yeah, like that sounds good. We'll do that. and then that's usually when we'll do the game, and so that will kind of, that again starts building off that foundation into the feeling of cohesion and family, and it just kind of traditionally. So this is what I've experienced in the 4 holidays that I've been there as a generalization, but that really starts building through the rest of the day with the games building up that sense of family and community, and then coming up with a talent show together and cooking food together and eating together. And it really does start to feel really special and really like a solid family. Like, okay, we're all in this together, and there's a lot more smiles and laughter, and it turns into something really magical. And I love going to holidays in the field, both as a guide and as a field manager. I really looked forward to them because there's something special about it. And but it's not all sunshine and butterflies. Usually the group culture will get built up after we go through that process of letting out the sadness and then building it up. But also inevitably there's individual triggers. A student, for example, will see the ham, and they'll remember like, oh, this is what I usually had when I was back at home with my family was ham, and so they'll get that. That'll put them into this sense of sadness. And usually by then the group culture is strong enough, and there's enough of that sense of family that the students are really there for the other students, and they'll go like, oh, like I hear that you're really sad right now, and that the ham kind of triggered you, and the group will build up the one student that's kind of been triggered by something, and so that's really common, and it's really cool to see, because in that instance the guides really do step back and let the students create their community and create how they celebrate the holiday and create that sense of family. And so that's really cool to see. That's usually a common thing. And then usually like I was saying earlier, usually during the cooking or the preparing of food, in the eating of food, guides really encourage students to share stories. Like, tell us a story about your favorite holiday, or tell us a story about what Uncle Joe usually does, or so there's always every family has something funny and quirky and awesome that they do on holidays, and we really try to encourage students to share that, because again that really builds that sense of community. A lot of students will, like my uncle always tells the story of when he was young, and then another student will be like, oh yeah, my grandfather always did that, and so there's a lot of relating. There's a lot of, oh yeah, like this is what my family does, and that again that really creates continues to build that sense of community and togetherness. And then once all of Open Sky gathers together for the fire competition, that also has a lot of times students will really get built up by that too, because it's not just their individual little group that's in the field. They realize that there's anywhere from 30 to 40 to 50 other students, and half that amount of guides and other Open Sky people that come out into the field, which I'll touch on later. But just that bigger sense of community is really cool. It really does build up students the awareness of, wow, like, I'm really not alone in this. There's a lot of other people out here, and that we're all here to to make the most of it and really do something fun with it. And then that will go through the fire busting, and there's been some really amazing therapeutic breakthroughs I've actually seen during the fire busting. Like one year, I remember there was a student who was really struggling with blowing up a nest into flame, which is a part of making a primitive fire. Once you get a coal with your fire set, you have to put it into bark from a juniper tree, and you blow on it really lightly, and then blow it harder and harder and harder, and eventually it turns into flame. And it's kind of difficult. Actually, all of fire busting is pretty difficult, but this one student probably been there for 5 or 6 weeks and couldn't do it. And the group that she was a part of got the first coal and got the coal in the nest the first before anybody else, and they handed her the nest and said, "Here, you do this." And she was at first like, "No, I can't do it, too much pressure, like it's too much, I can't." But the group was really supportive and like, "We trust you, like do it." And she did it. She pulled through, she got the flames, they won the bust off, and it was this breakthrough for her of like, I can do it. I can be there for my community. I did something I didn't think I could do. I had the support of the group, and it was actually really a turning point in her journey at Open Sky. And that's not all that uncommon for both the bust off and the talent show. It's a really big, vulnerable thing for a student to go up in front of 60, 70 people that are there in a holiday and sing a song they wrote, and with all the encouragement of their group and the encouragement of the greater Open Sky community. So there's been a lot of magic there that I've seen as well. And then the individual reflection time can be really powerful too. That can go, so after the bust off, when we go back to the individual groups and we give students space, it's usually getting dark and it's getting cold, and they're really thinking about the holidays, both their experience that they just had and their families and where they came from. And so the reflection time, I've seen a lot of kind of breakthroughs come through that too, where students have actually said, I had more fun this holiday than I did last Christmas, even though I was with my family last Christmas. Like this was actually really fun. And so we've had that reflection of students realizing like, I actually had a really amazing day. I wasn't expecting it. I was expecting it to be this sad, I'm going to miss my family the whole day. And then they'll realize like, wow, actually I didn't. And it was really powerful and a fun day. And then there's also some students will get back into the sadness, back into the like, wow, I really miss my family right now. Like right now we would usually be eating popcorn in front of a fire with our family, and they'll go back into that sadness. And that can be really powerful as well. They both have their therapeutic values, and they both will get processed around the fire a little bit later throughout the day. The other interesting thing about both Christmas and Thanksgiving is that it's a typical day in the sense that all of the structure and consequences and safety is all still there. Like supervision still has to be where it always is. But there's also this sense of the guides kind of set this tone of it's not going to be a normal day at Open Sky. We're not going to like have a group and have to process families, or it's not a typical day. Like we're going to actually, there's this sense of we're going to let up on the therapeutics. We're going to like not be just pushing you guys like we usually do, and therapeutically it's just going to be the day with all of us hanging out in the woods. And so that creates a sense of relief for the students that is actually ultimately really therapeutic for them in the end, and ends up can end up being really powerful with the students. Without that pressure there, it can actually bring up a lot for students, and a lot gets processed. And so that's a pretty common thing to see as well. So that's how holidays feel in the field. Guides roles. The holidays are really powerful for guides as well. It's a big sacrifice for them. They spend 2 weeks with the group through either Thanksgiving or Christmas. So the way guide shifts are broken up, there's the guide schedule is 8 days on, 6 days off, Tuesday to Tuesday. And so on a Tuesday, there's always one set of guides coming into the field and one set of guides leaving the field. And that's the traditional like week on, week off. It's like that all year. But around the holidays, the way they split it up is that one of those, so we call one shift the open shift and one shift the sky shift. So currently right now on this Monday afternoon, the open shift is in the field and the sky shift is out of the field. So we just label it that way. But the way we handle holidays with the guide schedule is that one of the shifts so this year the open shift is doing the Christmas double. So they're in the field for 2 weeks over Christmas, but they had 2 weeks off over Thanksgiving. And then it's the other way around. The sky shift was in the field for 2 weeks at Thanksgiving, and they have 2 weeks off over Christmas. So there's something, as a guide, there's something special and magical about I'm going in the field for the Christmas double or the Thanksgiving double. It's a big deal as a guide to do that as well. So there's that charge there for the guides as well. So that's fun, and in addition to that, it really helps build rapport with the students too, because the guides come in and they're like, oh, I'm going to be here for the next 2 weeks with you guys through the holiday. And the 2 weeks uninterrupted without the staff exchange can actually go a long ways towards building relationships and making it even stronger sense of family, because there's not that interruption with the new guide shift coming in, the old one going out. There's a 2 week consistency, and that has some power in building relationship and rapport as well. And then one of the other fun things about holidays is that a lot of office staff, higher ups, therapists, the CEO and executive director will oftentimes go out into the field for either Thanksgiving or Christmas. There's always somebody special in the field that's not the typical what the students are used to seeing in the field. And that's kind of fun too, because it also helps build rapport with the students. Be like, oh, I'm really not alone in this. The CEO is coming out here for Thanksgiving, and that's actually really powerful and special for the students and the guides. And so that's fun too. And usually they'll be involved in cooking, or they'll be involved in helping the students come up with their talent show acts and stuff like that. So that's kind of fun too, as far as creating that bigger sense of community within the Open Sky experience. And like I was saying earlier, guides really co-create the tone of the day with the students. Guides really they'll pull the students aside, sometimes individually and as a group, and process like, so what do we want this day to look like? What would you guys, if we weren't here but you were stuck out in the desert, what would you do? And so they go through that and that conversation. They really allow the students to have a say in how it goes, and they also guide it too. It's still they veto certain things, and but the guides really set the tone of the day. They'll initiate feelings checks. They'll initiate any other processing or sadness that comes up, processing sadness and things like that. So yeah, the staff does that, and they like I said earlier, they also really still keep the safety and the supervision, and that has to stay there as well. And so they're really on top of that usually. And then typically, I mean, I think the basic description of what a guide's job is to keep students physically and emotionally safe, and creating emotional safety, an environment of emotional safety within the group, and so that's there every day, and it's also especially there on holidays. They really try to create that that feeling of emotional safety on the holiday, because they know it's a special day, and it could be a sad day, particularly a triggering day for some of the students. So that's a guide's role. Students' role. So within that experience of working with guides to create the day, the students really do help create the day. They can say, hey, like, I want to say this prayer before dinner, and the guides will be like, great, why don't you do that? Or a student will say, I want to sing this song that my family usually sings, and so they'll be like, all right, great, like, why don't you go teach it to the other students, and then we'll sing it. And so the guides really empower the students to create their own day. And then just like any other day, there's students that have been there for longer and students that have been there for less time. And so some of the students that have been there for longer there's this, pretty typically the most senior student will really step up on a holiday, because they'll have this sense of like, wow, like the group is really depending on me emotionally to be strong and to be there, because it's a special day. And so the senior student or the emotional leader will really step up and like really help create the tone of the day with the other students, and you know, they'll even like sometimes play field guide, or they'll see a student looking sad, and instead of letting a guide do it, they'll go up to the student and be like, oh, so what's going on for you right now? What are you feeling? And like encourage them to bring it to the group, or to bust an I feel. And so students really step up to support each other through the day. And then again, sharing family traditions is a big thing. I mentioned that over and over again. And that's just, I just think that that's a really special part of holidays in the field, is that sharing stories and sharing traditions. And then the talent show also, usually the students will know about the talent show 5 or 6 days ahead of time, so they can start thinking about it. But typically the human experience is you wait until 2 hours before it's due to really create it. So usually it gets created. The students really step up and create what they want to do an hour or two before the actual talent show. And the guides will sometimes play a role or sometimes not. It depends on the group, and it depends on what the students want to do. If the students or if it's a group that's like really go-getters and they have everything together and they're like, this is what we really want to do, then the guys will just kind of step back and let the students create it. And sometimes they'll step in a little bit more and just help support them in creating that talent show. But really, most of the time, it's really on the students to create that, and that's a fun too, as I'll talk about more about that later. So food for Thanksgiving, it's traditional American Christmas and Thanksgiving food. So Thanksgiving, they get turkey, they get mashed potatoes, yams. They'll get a pumpkin pie, as you can see there on the table there. That's a picture from Thanksgiving. So it's a special food day for them as well. That's also a jug of apple cider. So lots of special, out of the ordinary food, and that helps create that sense of like, this is something really special and big and out of the ordinary. And so this year I talked to the woman who's sending in all the food. So this year they'll have yams, a ham, green beans, hot chocolate, brownies, popcorn, and homemade biscuits. And in addition to that, they have all the food that they have for the rest of the week. So there's a bunch of other vegetables in there, and they can really be creative in creating the food. And for me, the highlight for the students and the highlight for guides and with the food is Dutch ovens. We have them at base camp, and a Dutch oven is basically like a 16 or 20 inch cast iron pot that has a really thick, heavy lid and has little legs that lifts it off the ground. And if you know how to use them, which all the guides do, you can use it just like an oven. You can bake bread, you can make cinnamon rolls, you can bake a turkey, you can bake a ham, you can do whatever you want with it just by using coals from the fire. So you take coals from the fire and actually put most of the coals on the lid. About 80% of the coals you use, you stack on top of the lid, and then you put the rest underneath the Dutch oven, and that will bake whatever you put in it. And so they'll bake the turkey or bake the ham in the Dutch oven, and it's kind of fun. It takes constant supervision. You always have to be rotating coals off and on, hot coals off and on the Dutch oven, and rotating the lid and stuff like. There's all these fun little like lore and tricks around Dutch oven cooking, and so that's a big part of cooking in the field, and it's fun. And like I said, there's the gratitude circle before they eat, the prayers. Gratitude circle, I guess, for you folks that don't know, a typical before a meal, any meal at Open Sky, they do a gratitude circle. So everybody kind of touches knuckles, and then they go around in a circle, and every student says something that they're grateful for, just one or two things, like I'm grateful for my family or for my dog Sam or something like that, and everybody just goes around and says something that they're grateful for. And then holidays, we'll usually add something special. Like I said, a student will feel called to say a prayer that they're used to saying on the holiday, and we really open the space for that and try to encourage that. And then eating, obviously, that once that's all said and done, we sit down and eat and then enjoy the meal. And the last couple of times I ate with a group in a holiday, I kind of initiated the conversation of like, so what are your family's traditional meals during Christmas or Thanksgiving, whichever one I'm there for, and we'll go around in a circle, and each student will talk about what their traditional family meal looks like, and that's fun too, because there'll be a lot of like, oh yeah, I eat that too, or like, yeah, that's funny, like really, you have biscuits and cheese too, like that's what my family does. So It's kind of fun. There's a lot of relating around the food. Yeah, and then the bust off. So this is a better picture of what fire by friction looks like, and it's also a good example. So the way that we set up the fire busting competition is I tie a string about 100 feet long between two trees, about 4 feet off the ground. And so the basic competition is whichever group can melt the string the fastest wins. So that means busting the coal, like using that friction right there where you can see with the bow going back and forth. They get a coal and then they put it in a nest and they blow that up. And then they create a big fire with all, they have to make kindling and everything. So it's the whole process of creating a fire, not just the coal or not just blowing up the nest. You actually getting a fire big enough to melt the string that's 3 or 4 feet off the ground. So it's challenging, and some of the base rules are that all students have to have a hand on the set or somehow involved in some way. Nobody can stand aside. So that in that picture there, you see about 3 students with their hands on top of the top rock. There's a student on either end of the bow. There's a different student with their foot on the board, and then a different student will blow up the nest, and somebody else will be in charge of stacking the wood in just the right way, scientifically, how they'll think will raise the flames the fastest to melt the string. So, and guides will be involved too. I'll let guides be involved in the bust off. Their role is with the sharps. We don't let during the bust off, don't hand out any knives or axes. So the staff is in charge of creating kindling and things like that. But that's usually about the only role they play in the bust off. And there's a lot of buildup around this too, that the students are aware of this all day. And so another typical activity that happens while everybody's waiting for the meal to be cooked is getting their fire set dialed. They get it all perfect because there's a lot of pride involved. There's always a prize to the 2 years that I was field managing. I made a handmade juniper carved big serving spoon as the prize for whichever group won the bust off would get that wood carving. And there's been other things too, depending on who's out there. But there's always some sort of pride, real pride, that prize, as well as just pride in general for being the fastest group. And actually I know that the last Thanksgiving, Team Cleopatra, the adolescent girls, won the bust off. And so that's really fun. It's really fun when that happens. And so that really creates group cohesion. It creates a sense of community, and it's really fun. And the other slide that's on this presentation here is Cleopatra made this medicine wheel, a representation of the medicine wheel. And so you see kind of the upper left corner is a bear, and that animal represents the west, and then the buffalo represents the north, the eagle represents the east, and the coyote there represents the south. And that's how we map students' progressions through the Open Sky experience. They start in the south, and then after they complete a certain amount of assignments and then just emotional and physical growth at Open Sky, then they'll move to the west and then to the north and to the east. And so it's kind of a big part of the culture and community at Open Sky. And so I think this was a Thanksgiving. Cleopatra, during the day as they were cooking, they created a group art project together, and that's what they created. So that's another common thing that happens. So that's the bust off. Let's see, there we go. And then the talent show. Talent show is usually very humorous. It's very, it's students making fun of themselves. It's students making fun of guides. I think one of the most fun talent shows I saw was guides put on the students' jackets, and the students put on guides' jackets, and then they played each other. The guides were acting as if they were students, and the students were acting as if they were guides, and they were making fun of each other back and forth, and just it was really funny and created a lot of laughs. I saw Avatar, the adolescent boy group, one time. They had three students standing in front of a table with a bunch of food, and then the students that were standing on their table had their hands down, and there were students behind them that were faking it as if they were the students in the front's hands, and so they were giving this cooking demonstration, or like, this is how you cook cheesy torts. But the people that were talking didn't have control over their hands. It was really funny. So that's fun because it's hard to feel sad when everybody in all of Open Sky is laughing. Like there there can even be students that have been, especially students that have just gotten there, have like really felt sad all day. This particular moment with the talent show is really what I've seen students that have been kind of like sad all day perk up and really start laughing and having a good time. So they're really fun. And then like I was saying earlier, there's the individual students will really creates a sense of power too. If somebody's willing to be like, hey, like this is who I am. I'm going to come up in front of you guys and play the guitar and sing this song that I wrote. It's really vulnerable and really special, and the groups really all kind of come together and encourage them. Like, yeah, you can do it. Like students inevitably be like, oh, I'm really shy and embarrassed, and this is probably not going to sound good. And everybody else that's in the audience is like, oh yeah, well, like just go with it. We love you. We support you. Do it. And so that's really fun. And this picture here is of a Thanksgiving talent show, and it's a guy that's actually really good at the clawhammer style banjo. Is playing the guide is playing the banjo, and the student is singing a song that she wrote. And so I remember that moment. It's really good moment there. I've also seen a guide. Sometimes a lot of guides are really talented musicians, really good at guitar or banjo or whatever, and so sometimes at the end of the talent show they'll get up and play a song that everybody knows, and so that all the students that are there will sing along to like Wagon Wheel or like a Bob Dylan song or something, kind of a song that everybody knows, and so that's really fun too. That's kind of that'll usually happen. And then, like I said, depending on the timing, there's another activity involved. One year, one of my favorite guides, or a guide that's been there for a really long time, really powerful guide, is a really good storyteller, and he told this great animated myth. I think it was a traditional Celtic myth, and so that was really fun too. It's good to see that. And then another year, I think it was a couple Christmases ago, we did a drum circle where all the guides, there's a bunch of drums at the grad site, and all the guides got those out and started a beat, and there was kind of a little bit of a dance party. Everybody was like dancing around a little bit and singing, and that was really fun. A lot of hooting and hollering, and so there's that. There's also within the bus stop and the talent show, there's also guides are really aware of supervision, and they're always counting heads. We're kind of keep the adolescent girls and the adolescent boys apart. We let them interact a little bit, but there's a lot of supervision involved in it as well, just so that students don't slip away or there's something like that going on. So there's a strong sense of safety too. There's always a guide in charge of if you need to go pee, like you go to this guide first, and they'll tell you where to go and make sure there's no like run-ins in the woods and stuff like that. So it's really the big group activities also really held logistically and supervision wise by myself or by the field manager and by the guides. So that is the talent show. And then back in after the talent show, back in the group, we send the students off on their own, and they get about an hour to reflect, journal, do whatever they want, and that's been powerful. Again, it's guide shift to guide shift, holiday to holiday. It changes. Sometimes I've seen guides give an assignment, like they're like, go reflect, but maybe write 4 or 5 sentences about what would you like holidays to look like in the future? Like what traditions have you learned here at Open Sky that you want to bring to family traditions in the future in holidays? And there's been a number of other assignments given by guides, some of them more artistic, like draw a picture that represents this holiday, or write a letter to your family talking about what the holiday was like. So that happens as well. And then usually, like I said, that's kind of after it's dark, and so that'll happen for about an hour, and then we'll gather again around the fire for kind of an evening snack before everybody goes to bed. And sometimes it's processed, like, so what did you learn with your reflection? And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just kind of, it's clear that the energy is like, oh, we just need to be sitting around the fire together as a community and eating and just kind of talking. So it can really. It really depends on the group, on the guides, on the culture of really what needs to happen kind of happens after that time of reflection. So as the reflection. Other holidays. With some of the holidays that guides especially like to celebrate are the solstices and equinoxes. And the reason is that they're really metaphorically rich. Like the winter solstice is the longest day, or the winter solstice is the shortest day and the longest night. And so there's a lot of metaphor about what's been your darkness, what do you want to create moving into the future, what kind of lightness do you want to bring into your world. And then the equinoxes are the equal days and equal nights, and so there's usually some sort of acknowledgement around that. And so it's a way of students connecting with their own therapeutic process through guides creating metaphor, and it's also a way of connecting with the greater world, connecting with something beyond yourself, connecting with nature is a big part of wilderness therapy. And you really students being out there for 2 or 3 months at a time, they really get a sense of the rhythms of how the moon works, how the stars rotate. They see the same constellations. They see like 2 or 3 phases of the moon, so they really get to intimately learn how the moon gets full and how it gets new and things like that. So it's just creating a connection to something beyond themselves. We'll also celebrate important anniversaries for students, and that's usually something that the student will work out with their therapist. Like it could be something positive, like sobriety. They'll do a lot of celebration around sobriety. Like if a student's been sober for a month, even if the whole time it's been at Open Sky, we still really celebrate that. And we give them that. We kind of, again, it's just like a holiday. The guides collaborate with the student. Like, how do you want this to look like? Let's create something for you, and the students get involved. And also it does change from student to student as well. Sometimes the guides will just say, we're going to do this as a group for this student. Like they'll pull the rest of the group aside and say, like, so it's John's 2-month sobriety day today. Like, let's do something for him. What should we do? And so that's celebrated. And also heavier anniversaries of family members' deaths, or of an overdose, or of a suicide attempt, or something like that. There's, if it feels therapeutically appropriate with the therapist and the guides, they'll all work together to create some sort of celebration or acknowledgement ceremony around that. So that's kind of the other common thing that's celebrated, and holidays as well. Jewish holidays, Arabic holidays, any traditional holiday that if it's meaningful for a student, then we'll create something for them if they want to, and it seems important to them, and they talk about it with the guides and the therapists. We'll create it for them. So it's and that's really fun. It can be therapeutically really valuable because it empowers students to create something for themselves and to carry on tradition. I've seen students be like, my parents usually do this particular ceremony on this holiday, or they celebrate this holiday in this way, and it's powerful for them to take that over and take it into their own hands and say, I'm going to do this now. My parents aren't here, but I'm going to create this like the way I'm used to, and that can be really empowering and awesome for a student. So we'll do that as well. And birthdays are always acknowledged. Typically what happens is the kitchen will send out, we keep track of the birthdays, and the kitchen will send out a brownie mix that's made in a Dutch oven. That's actually a great picture of a Dutch oven there on that slide, and some students making cinnamon rolls, it looks like. But they'll use that Dutch oven to make brownies for a student's birthday. And it's really different from student to student or group to group, whether it's just simply like acknowledging the birthday and eating some brownies, to doing something special like a gift exchange or something like that. And that's another thing I forgot to mention about Christmas is sometimes, again, depending on the guide shift or the guides, there'll be a gift exchange where the kind of the parameters I've seen have been that has to be handmade with natural objects, and you don't know who you're giving your gift to. There's just like a circle where everybody puts something that they made in the center of the circle, and then it's given out randomly, or it can look actually a million different ways. But sometimes, depending on the energy and the guides, they'll create some sort of a gift exchange among the students, and that's fun too. That can be powerful. So that is the other holidays and celebrations at Open Sky, and that is my presentation. So Thanks for tuning in and listening to me ramble about holidays in the field, and I hope you all have a beautiful Christmas or Thanksgiving or Valentine's Day or whatever holiday you're celebrating. So thanks for being here.